When I was in college, all I really wanted to do was lift as heavy weights as possible, wrestle, eat as much food as possible, and party. And those things don't really make you an effective college wrestler, at least not in combination. And ultimately, what I ended up with was being relatively injury prone and being injured more often than not led to me being pretty consistently out of wrestling shape. And I had a lot of pretty significant injuries when I was in college. I tore cartilage in my knee that needed surgery, and I tore cartilage in my ribs, which was definitely one of the more painful injuries that I've ever had. And I've had, over the years, quite a few significant injuries. But a friend of mine reminded me recently of the probably worst injury that I ever had, which occurred well after college and was actually in my kind of early 30s, I think. So in my early 30s, I was probably the strongest that I've ever been, and also quite a bit heavier than I am now. So right now I'm in that like 170 to 180 range. In my early 30s, I was usually above 200 pounds and at one point, much heavier. But when I was in relatively decent shape, I was, somewhere between 210 and 225. And I was pretty strong at that time. My best squat was over 500 pounds. My best deadlift was just a shade under 600 pounds, like 575, something like that. And my best bench press was, that I remember anyway, is doing 375 for a double. So I was, much stronger than I am now. And that was kind of the peak of my strength. And by far, the worst injury that I ever had actually came not from lifting my kind of peak weights. It actually came when I was deadlifting with something relatively heavy, but quite significantly sub-maximal. So I think, like I said, I deadlifted around 575 as my heaviest single rep deadlift, but I actually completely destroyed my lower back deadlifting 365 on a trap bar at this gym that I was at the time, one of the best gyms I had been in. It was owned by a real kind of old school meathead kind of guy, and he had just bought this humongous space and stocked it full of, heavy equipment. They had dumbbells that went up to 150 pounds and, just all kinds of good bodybuilding and powerlifting equipment. And I was deadlifting with, like I said, 365 on a trap bar, and I just kind of shifted my body in a bad way and ended up blowing out one disc significantly, compressing another, and in kind of the fall from the, being mid-lift, I ended up doing some more damage to my ribs. And so, being a stubborn man as I am, I eventually peeled myself up off the floor of that gym and limped my way out. And at the time, unfortunately, I was still driving that 1970 pickup truck, which was a manual transmission. So in blind pain agony, I drove myself home in the pickup, almost passing out from pain on the drive. And that was by far my worst training-related injury. So when I deadlift now, I don't go as heavy, and I definitely focus more on stiff leg deadlifts. But for years, I just wouldn't deadlift at all due to how badly I had injured myself training. That was that was by far my worst training injury. It took many, many years to, recover from, and I really never regained the strength that I had before the injury. The body just didn't recover in the same way. So, yeah, there you go. That's the story of my worst ever lifting injury. Enjoy. Bye.